This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
In 5, check for sound. 4,
It's showtime.
3,
Let's
2,
go.
1.
You're listening to the Pro Audio Suite, a program for audio and voiceover professionals. And welcome to another episode. This is officially episode 3, even though we did have an episode 3, but that was a special from VO Atlanta. Speaking of which, 2 of our hosts were there in VO Atlanta, and we did talk to them about the event, but we didn't get into some of the details, and I know Robbo's got a few questions for George and Robert.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested to know. You mentioned the LinkedIn seminar, but I'm interested to hear what else was spoken about in terms of topic.
Well, I mean, I can look... Because I was sequestered somewhat. I was tucked away.
Chained.
You were Robertized.
Chained to a studio.
I was in a pretty busy little studio we set up, back-to-back people in and out in there recording. But the things I was hearing a lot of buzz about that people were, getting a lot of benefit was based around, business and marketing. I think that's the kind of thing that really a lot of voice actors need a lot of help with, beyond the acting. Because a lot of people come into it with an acting background. Many don't, but they have no entrepreneurial skills whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know how much this business requires entrepreneurial skills. So there was speakers that were speaking on that. Paul Strickwarda, Sean Caldwell, who was on our show last time. Rachel Naylor, who's from the UK. Mike Cooper, who's lives in the US, but he's from the UK, I believe. And Sophia Cruz. And as well as David Tyler, were speaking on the topics of business and marketing. Those were some of the, I hear tell, some of the most well-attended panels, or sessions, I should say. And they had a lot of things going on. I mean, there were at any one time up to, I understand, 12 or 13 concurrent sessions going on. That's how many people were there speaking and attending sessions. They had... Many of them were included in the event, but then there were others that were additionally had additional cost called X sessions. And those were 3-hour-long sessions. And so those were limited to small numbers of people, and they paid extra to go to those. So there was a mind-boggling amount of content. I would argue to say too much. Just, it's so much that you just don't know what to go to.
Yeah.
It was really big. And I'm sure everyone left going... I wish I went to that other one, or I couldn't go to see everything that I wanted to see because
Mm-hmm. And then my girlfriend, Maxine, who you heard about from last time, was there, and she's a voice actor, and she was trying to get the most of it. And she'd say, you'd be there for 20 minutes in a session, and then they'd go off on a tangent on something that they want to rant about. And she'd be thinking, well, I don't want to hear a rant right now. I want good stuff, And then she'd feel like I want to get out of here and go somewhere else. And she's not the kind of person that jumps up and walks out on somebody presenting.
Well, she is English.
Yeah, she's proper.
Yes.
She's Liverpudlian. But
we were talking about different types of exits, remember?
Yes, we were. They all had different cultural names attached to them. But yeah, there was some great promo presenters. There was some Townsend Coleman was speaking, Tom Pinto, Kay Bess and Jeff Howell. They were all speaking about promo and imaging.
There was a good game one. There was a game thing with I think Fenoy was in that one.
Mm-hmm. And Hugh Edwards also spoke on gaming. And Hugh and his partner Peter are in the UK, and they run this thing called Gravy for the Brain. A very odd name for a program that is in essence on-demand video training. But they've narrowed it down to training in voiceover. Because I guess they figured that's where the money is. So I think it was covering a wider range of topics, and then they focused it to voiceover. And that was interesting to hear what they had to say. There was a technology and production track as well, but which I would have liked to have been a part of, but I was there as a slave, so I didn't get to do that. There was Tim Keenan, who runs a studio in California in Orange County, and Tim Tippett and Roy Yokelson. Roy, known as in the States here, we call him Uncle Roy, with many years in production and engineering. And Tim Tippett was a really interesting fellow. I've interviewed him and had him on my show, and he's really got an interesting background. But so, I mean, those are just some of the tracks. I mean, there was youth programs, There was commercial and improv, international programs. There were a whole bunch of folks, Spanish-speaking talent doing their own sessions in Spanish. So it was quite remarkable, the ground they covered.
So I have two questions out of that for me. Being a bit ignorant when it comes to these sort of shows and how they work over there. I mean, how many people are we talking attending this event? It's obviously not just a few hundred.
There was 600 people.
Yeah, they proclaimed about 600 people,
Well, okay.
I would say at any one time, I don't think there was that many people there because some people would come in for a day and leave and such. But I'm sure there was north of 500 people there. The main hall that held the largest group of people, it was a pretty good sized room and it was pretty well packed. They also video streamed a whole bunch of the event. They were selling pay-per-view video for people that couldn't attend, which I'm sure you can still get a lot of the video. They couldn't possibly cover every session. They only could cover a fraction of them. But they were not only recording but live streaming a lot of content there. So it was pretty amazing what they covered.
So if you include that then, I mean, attendance could actually sort of go through the thousands then, if you include the people who sat down and watched the online streaming.
I don't know how big the video stream was, but and it could keep on going in theory, I guess. I don't know how long they're running the video stream, but throughout the year, so...
Yeah, you pay, the longer you want access to the content, the more you pay.
Okay.
So it's like cheaper for a month access, and for a full year, you pay the most, is how he prices it.
Yeah.
Smart, I think.
And AP, you're around the voiceover industry here with real-time casting. Why don't we see this sort of thing here? Is it too small a community, or what's the deal with that?
Well, it's interesting because I've actually spoken to George about exactly that, and obviously I'm not going to let too much out the bag, but we've had a small discussion about that kind of idea for Australia, and I also think that a lot of the things that happen in America, they don't always fit here. They're it's not a given. But when you come to things like marketing, setting up home studios, all that kind of stuff, that it fits beautifully. And
it's all just as relevant.
And, we're obviously going to play a piece of audio in a moment. And if you're talking about home studios, that, you know as well, Robbo, that in Australia, there's not that many people that have them. And when the ones that have got them, there's not that many people that have ones that are acceptable as a full broadcast setup. So it kind of is new ground here.
Didn't know that.
Does it feel like the industry, like I feel like the voiceover industry in the US is sort of expanding right now, and there's much more content through all the different, online radio and YouTube, and as people get more savvy about how they produce their media, they're either hiring people or they're just trying to do a better job with their own voiceover and how they present it. But it seems like it's a booming industry or increasing. Do you have the same feeling in Australia?
Well, I do know because I got some stats from a friend of mine who's a treasurer and had access to US government stats. And it was a document very similar to the one that Voices.com did, funnily enough. We did ours about 3 years ago, and the stats showed that the voice industry in North America was $3.2 billion. That was the value of the whole industry as a whole, and they were predicting a growth of 18% over the coming years. And they also, and one of the other figures was by 2020, they estimated that the voiceover industry would be worth about $5.4 billion in North America.
Wow.
What?
It's huge,
inspiring.
and it's growing. And in fact, yesterday I heard an interview with a guy from Canada who's one of the big players in gaming. And Canada set up a tax write-off for people who invested into what we call, traditional media of television, film. And they expanded that tax write-off into gaming. And they're currently sitting number 3 in the world of making video games, behind the US and China.
No kidding.
Wow.
It's huge.
Wow. Well, speaking of Canada, just one last little thing. I know a voice coach from Canada who was at the conference, and it was her debut conference in 7 years because she made a little boo-boo coming into the States one time and taught without having the correct permission to do so. And the U.S. said, well, we don't want you back for about 7 years.
Wow.
So that was a big deal. And so she was able to come this time. I don't want to name her name, just keep her, no need to call her out. But I mean, that was a really, really big deal and a lesson to a lot of folks coming in from outside the country, wanting to come here in the States and teach and make money without proper papers, whatever.
It's funny, isn't it, how that qualifies as an official teacher. You know, I mean, because I can guarantee George or Robert, if you guys came to Australia and set up a, camp here and said, I'm going to teach people how to set up home studios or whatever, wouldn't be an issue at all. No one would care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
You guys wouldn't cane us?
Oh, we would just for the fun, but I mean, we wouldn't.
No. Well, we could maybe take you up to the Northern Territory and feed you to the crocodiles or something, maybe.
Yeah, boy. Yeah. But it's a different kettle of fish down here, I think. We're a bit more easygoing.
It's an interesting can of worms you open, though, I mean, in terms of the state of the industry, because in terms of home studios here, they're not as widely accepted, are they, AP? They're starting to become so.
I think there's still a bit of pushback too. I still get studios, and I get told by my agent, look, I say, look, I can do this from here. They can, Source Connect or Phone Patch or ISDN, whatever they want to do. And it saves me driving into Melbourne. And it's like, no, we want you to go in. Or if I've got a studio in Sydney, which has happened a couple of times, it's like, well, they're going to Source Connect to the studio in Melbourne anyway, so why not Source Connect to mine?
That's right.
But we don't want to talk about that. You just go to into Melbourne.
As a studio, the interesting thing for me that I find is I don't get pushback on my work. People listen to my work or watch my work and go, man, that's awesome. And then they ask, where's your studio? And you say, well, it's in Castle Hill. Oh, man, that's a long drive. Well, yeah, it's a home studio. Yeah, okay, we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Yeah. So the work sounds awesome. We're happy with the work, and the work that I always put up on a demo is always stuff that I've done out of here because I don't want any false pretenses in that respect.
Drop the word home.
Yeah.
Call it a project studio.
Yeah.
Because that's still legit. I mean, we call them project studios in the States. They're basically a studio for a specific person's projects.
Yeah.
But
I think that ship has sailed in the sense that the voiceovers, that's sort of that article that you and I wrote, George, where it's like, at this point, voiceover talent, at least in the US, are practically expected to have their own home setup. And then the people hiring are really seeking out those because then they sort of use that as a way of having a lower cost because they're not paying at least for the remote studio. They're still paying for the connection, but traditionally you'd pay for 2 studios and a connection. And now they're getting much more accustomed to paying for 1 studio and a connection, and the voiceover is just expected to throw their facility into the, as part of their service. But then I also know, I was just talking to some customers who are doing mixing for, cable shows, like documentary type or reality type shows. And they're mixing these from their project studios and using various remote technologies to, have their day of playback and commenting. And even that stuff is being done all remotely to the point where one of the people I was talking with was basically saying, get me out of New York. It's too expensive to live here. And I can do this all remotely, and I'm going to go live someplace where it's not so expensive to live, and I'm going to keep my clients.
Yeah, I agree. To me, we all accept Skype or FaceTime as something we use on a daily basis to communicate with friends or colleagues. In meetings, people sit around a screen and do a Skype meeting. But there still seems to be this kind of weird pushback about working from studios like this, and I don't understand it. Maybe if we had a Skype or a FaceTime kind of version of a home studio where you can see me in the booth, I can see you in the control room. It looks like I'm actually behind the glass, but the glass is actually an LCD screen.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who's making that decision as to where the session is going to be done. Because if it's, studios, they want to protect their interests. They don't want loss of income from all these home studios, and that's that slippery slope has already happened in the States for sure. There's studios in LA that I was afraid to walk into, thinking that my face was on a dartboard in the back room.
Yes,
you're the enabler.
It's him.
Yeah, because my job is to basically take all these talent out of their studios and make their home studios sound like professional studios. But I mean, this is also anecdotal. Robert, you would probably have some more to say about this, recording people all around the world. But the folks that work with me, which are outside of the States, seem to have a higher standard of sound quality that they are trying to achieve. They seem to go a little bit more to the nth degree to achieve, the best possible sound quality. Whereas in the States, I think we have a little bit lower acceptable quality. I mean, this is subjective, but what do you think,
I agree.
Robert?
Well, I've talked to some talent in Canada, and they're sitting there with API hardware and Neumann M149s and really high end stuff. Where I'm even like, I've got some music to record with that, and then then on the flip side, everyone in the States, the 416 is holding strong, but really in the face of an M149, the 416 is not the same mic and
Not the same class, no.
No, I mean it's and even that, like, not every talent has a 416. Everyone's trying to push it more towards the, like, that Rode mic that we were looking at. Like, how close is this one to a 416? And everyone's trying to sort of get away with equivalents of some type. And I think certainly with broadcast and TV, there's definitely more of an attitude of sounds good is good.
That's one of my slogans that I use on one of the forums. Is it sounds good. It is good.
Well, but that's interesting because we've got a piece of audio from a session that Robbo did the other day, which highlighted one of the issues that even if it sounds good in your place, by the time the engineer gets their hands on it, it may sound bloody awful. Have you got that piece of audio there, Robbo?
I'll give it to you. This is it gained up.
I want to make sure it's making it across. Let me make sure.
I can hear it.
Output. It definitely made it across. Yep.
Yeah, I heard it clearly.
Yeah, it was there. So yeah, it's sort of a. I'll amplify with my mouth. I'll imitate it. Kind of a thing.
Right.
I think it sounds acoustic. I think it's
Really?
environmental. I kind of do, because it lacks some high frequencies, I think, or that's
Yes.
my ears.
It's not a straight up white noise. It's definitely not like a typical white noise.
Yeah.
I know where this person lives, and it's quite a busy road, but that doesn't sound to me like traffic noise.
It's not traffic noise.
No, I think it's
it sounds to me like
fan, a hard
it's gear.
drive.
My first
Yeah.
thought it was a fan. That was my first initial impression, was it's a fan running on a very teeny weeny fan on a device. That's my first
Yeah, and
impression
then
was.
like sitting off axis enough, you get that weird phasiness, so it doesn't quite have the
It was phasing,
high
that's
frequencies.
for sure. Yep.
But then thought more about it, then started to think it was a piece of equipment with a technical issue in it. There's some circuit going kaplooey, a capacitor or something. I don't, I'm very anxious to find out what it is that's being used to make that recording.
I had an issue years ago when I first had a really ordinary setup, and I had a Behringer little mixing desk, little 4-channel mixer. And that sound, to me, it's very similar. When the thing let go, that's what it sounded like.
The interesting thing to throw in the mix here is this was actually this person's first online session from their inverted commas brand new studio. So it would be interesting to know whether it's if it's old gear, you could be right, but if it's new gear, that kind of takes that out of the equation.
What about if you had the gain round the wrong way? So you're actually, the output wasn't coming necessarily, you had the mic turned down and then you were trying to get gain from somewhere else. Would that have a similar effect?
Absolutely. Your gain stage is everything.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It would
right.
increase the noise for sure.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
noise? I'm not sure. I would think it'd be more a broadband white noise.
That's right. Or
Robbo, what kind of
room
level were you
tone.
getting of like actual signal?
Pretty good level. I was sitting around, it was probably peaking around -4, -5, and averaging -15, -20, around there somewhere.
Yeah, so very, very healthy signal. And
Yep.
then the compression that you probably applied a little bit brought that noise up.
Yeah. I just let that
The
sit.
sample you sent us with the voice was peaking at -2.62, and average was, or are you guys using LUFS or LUFS?
LUFS.
LUFS.
Yeah.
LUFS.
-21.3 LUFS. So that's a healthy signal.
Yeah. And I probably gained that up a touch because I actually just copied that out of my session. So
did you
I'd
do
probably
any
by then I probably
troubleshooting
touched
of it,
again.
or did you catch this after the fact? Was this like
I
you
caught
were
it
moving
after
so
the
fast?
fact, to be honest with you. That's what
Right.
it was one of those days where I had an hour and a half to record about 5 promos and 6 pages of sweepers. So it was just like,
this is the
wow.
nightmare of the remote engineer. This is why some
Yeah.
some engineers are like, I don't like voice talent with home studios because their quality level, like they're not aware of what they're listening for, and so they're like, oh, that
Yeah.
sounds great because it sounds better than your built-in mic on your Mac.
That's
but
right.
it's not really, like once everything gets exposed.
And here's my lesson out of this is because I do it with a lot of other voiceover artists who image other stations, but they're established. They've had their studios going for a while, like Lofty Fulton, for example, and guys like that.
Oh, yeah.
This person was booked a couple of days before the session. So it should have occurred to me when the agent said this person's just set up their new studio, it should have occurred to me to say, well, can they send me a sample? And I think that's the lesson I've taken from this is if it's a new talent, new studio, send me a sample first. I think that's definitely the lesson I've learned.
But
Yeah.
I always do that anyway. Like if I get a new client, I always say, what do you want? And I'll send maybe a sample of this microphone, a sample of another mic or another pre or whatever, and just say which one works for you,
Absolutely.
And based on that, do you think like George or Robert, Robert particularly, and Robbo, would you like to see a talent, if they're working from their own place, list the gear they've got and maybe even send you if push comes to shove, send you a photograph of the booth?
For me, it's like the main thing would be send me an audio example. And so I've done this a couple times, and I've actually had pretty good luck with it. So sometimes you find talent, they don't have a setup. They're in an area where the nearest real sort of post-production studio is still an hour and a half drive from them, like a good city. And so what is around their area is, your typical sort of $20 to $50 an hour music studio kind of thing. And then you really start wondering, because sometimes these guys are complete gearheads and they've got it down. And the real question is like, do they have some cavernous room that they love to get giant drum sounds out of? And that's not going to work. So the bigger question is like what their room sounds like is probably the first piece of gear that's in question. And then their mic and, just hook up and let's do a quick, it doesn't have to be the person, just like with the engineer, let's just hear your room and hear your chain. What's in it doesn't really matter. I mean, if we're usually when I end up talking to these people, it becomes a geek fest anyways, and so they're happy.
I've done one of those with you.
They're happy to be like,
right.
They're happy to be like, well, I've got a K2 and I've got a 414. I've got this mic and that mic, and you're like, oh, let's try this mic. But ultimately, kind of like we said, it's most of these mics, even the Chinese mics, are going to cut it pretty well. So yeah, it makes it a lot easier, a lot less stressful if you check out these studios ahead of time, any new situation, unless it's really like some post house where you just go to their website and you're like, kaboom, like their credits, everything speaks for itself and you don't really have to worry about who it is that you're booking with.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you pretty much got to deal with whatever's there gear-wise. But you're right. I think you just want to hear it first and know that when that mic is open and you're recording, that all those problems are taken care of, so you can actually focus on, right, I've got an hour to get this done. Let's just charge into it.
Yeah. I mean, actually, usually the bigger hurdle with a lot of these places is the concept of a mix minus is more foreign to them, and they're dealing with more like a consumer kind of low latency setup, so they're more limited in their ability to send out something that's separate from their headphone feed. And so you're sometimes coaching them into how to get that set up. But generally, I mean, I've also had the experience where a lot of the more affordable gear works really well in ideal situations. But I've even got this problem where I've got a computer monitor that's got a wall wart, and I use the same computer monitors in both of our rooms. But one of them, I have to switch the mic preamp out because we just went with like, it's talkback. Like we'll just jam it into go rummage through the closet, find a mic preamp, and there you go. Well, this particular mic preamp loves to hear all of the noise that this monitor can generate, whereas the other mic preamp seems to be completely immune to it. And it's not killing us, but it's kind of annoying when every time the clients open up the talkback, it's like,
Yeah.
So it's like something to solve. And that's often where the difference is in the gear is not even so much the initial capability of it, but its ability to be more resilient to other noises and problems.
Well, that was the interesting thing when I got this file from this person, that my talkback was actually in the file as well. So I was kind of glad that I was muting my mic on this end when they were performing, because it was full of my talkback in between.
Wow.
Right. They didn't have a mix minus.
They didn't have the mix minus, exactly.
No, that's right. It was going straight down.
Now, we should introduce our guest today. Talking of home studios, this person used Dan Leonard to help set up her home studio or personal studio or project studio, whichever you want to call it.
Project Studio. I like that name. I'm going with that.
Are you going with that one?
Voodoo Sound Project Studio. Yeah.
Nice.
Projectile Studio?
Projectile Studio.
Now,
that's what the clients do when they hear the mixes. They projectile vomit. That's right.
Or as we say in Australia, chunder. And talking about Australia, let's get another Aussie on the line, Larissa Gallagher. Are you a Gallagher or a Gallagher?
I am a Gallagher. Otherwise, my parents would probably disown me. But I find that if I have to do things in American accent, it's easier to slate my name as Gallagher. Either way, I'm happy if you just know my name.
Let's just... Exactly. Anyway, enough of that. You are originally from Perth, I gather, because and you went to WAPA, for those who don't know, which is the West Australian Performing Arts.
West Australian Academy of Performing Arts.
Oh, okay. Who was in your year of any notoriety apart from yourself, of course?
Well, at the moment, Fiona Choi, who is currently starring in the SBS television show that I can't remember the name. That's crazy.
Yes, I know the one, the sort of sitcom kind of show or comedy.
It's kind of a sitcom. It's based on the life of the young boy kind of growing up in the suburbs and his trials and tribulations in the family, and it's excellent. It's really funny. It's really heartbreaking. I think it's really good showing of how good Australians are at representing diversity when they want to.
Yeah.
It's a really fantastic show. Anyway, so she was in my year. Matthew Frank, who's quite a well-known composer and does a lot of work with the Melbourne Theatre Company. Other people are going to kill me if I mention people's names.
That's right. And the other people we haven't mentioned because we ran out of time. Otherwise we would have done.
Andrew cut it from the scene.
I did. I edited that bit out. But WAPA has got actually a really good reputation. A lot of big people have gone through there. It used to be in Australia, NIDA, but I think WAPA's giving it a good run for its money. And I've got a funny... Did Hugh Jackman go through WAPA?
He did. He actually graduated the year before I started, so I never got the chance to work with him, but he used to work at a local coffee shop on Sunday nights that we all used to go and hang out at, a restaurant, coffee shop, and make sure that we always got served by Hugh, because he was a pretty fabulous actor then and a pretty fabulous person then as well. So,
and his looks didn't go astray either, I'm sure.
Let's just say coffee was more enjoyable when it was served by Hugh Jackman.
There's not many people can actually claim that. I had my coffee served to me by Hugh Jackman.
That's right. Yeah. But yeah, really, really good-hearted guy. I think the beauty of WAPA is because it is so far away, you're slightly disadvantaged because you don't get as much of the networking and getting to know the who's who of the East Coast, but you have the safety and security of not being looked at, so you can kind of fail without it ruining your career or anything like that. You can explore and learn your challenges and get better at things without kind of having a watchful eye over you. So I think that's what makes WAPA really great. And I think kind of like NIDA and the rest of the schools, because it's an audition-only school, it does mean that the people that they take in are already highly vetted, and they generally tend to put people in class years that complement each other as well. So that helps to make a really good, cohesive year group.
Yeah, because I was talking to, actually I won't mention her name, but a very well-known actor based in Australia. She didn't go to NIDA, and we were talking about NIDA, and she was kind of the same age group, maybe a bit younger actually, but she could have been there with maybe a bit after Mel Gibson, that kind of era. And said if she had actually gone to NIDA, she would never have become an actor. It had the potential to be quite toxic.
Yeah, I think that's all kind of schools. I think some people are well suited to educational practice and some people are more suited to kind of learning from the ground up or learning in the field itself. And, you know, I know very successful actors who have not had a day of schooling in their lives and other actors who've had all the schooling in the world. And I think people just take their own paths, but if you are meant to be in one and you're trying to live in the other, it can break you apart. Because I do know that NIDA and WAPA to a degree kind of wanted to break you and remold you to make sure that you could be the best that you can be, and that sometimes can hurt people, but other people thrive in that experience.
Yeah. So was your plan coming out of WAPA to be an actor?
Yes. Musical theatre was what I studied, and that was kind of my main drive. But to be perfectly honest, I think at that time, which still remains, but I think I just kind of was so in love with the performing arts, just any opportunity to work I was happy to do. My kind of goal and aim was to be a working actor at the time. And so my focus was musical theatre, but I was auditioning for a lot of things. And I think just as things happen and timing and the way of the world works for some people straight out of school, and other people struggle for a long time, which I did. And I had just enough work to always make me think this was the thing I was meant to be doing and that I could really succeed in this world, but never quite enough to give up the day job or to feel personally satisfied by the career that came afterwards.
So how did you end up in America?
So that's an interesting story. I actually was doing a workshop of a new musical in Australia, in Melbourne, which had become very successful, and we were performing at the International Comedy Festival, the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, and we were sold out every night. And then a producer came in and he loved the show and he wanted to take it on a big tour of Australia and then talk about taking it to the West End, etc. And I was one of the original cast members, and I'd kind of been given the wink and the nudge saying, you'll be right, don't worry about it, we're on your side, we're going to get you in. And I didn't get the role. And so at the time, that was devastating because I had this moment of, who am I if I'm not good enough for the role that I feel like I kind of created? And so I chucked it all in and I moved back to Perth and started working for a radio station, working for Nova, which was fantastic, but behind the scenes doing promotions. I
didn't know this bit. This is interesting. I had no idea. No.
Yeah, because I think I needed to be in a creative industry, but anything to do with kind of theatre or film or television at the time, it was just, I was really hurt by the whole experience. And so I've found that at the radio station I was able to get that creative buzz, but without the pressure of my head and my little inner critic saying, you failed, you failed, you failed. So, the Nova family in Perth welcomed me and fabulous, and I loved working there, but it was all behind the scenes. And subsequently I did do a bit of theatre in Perth because friends were doing shows and they invited me in. So it was, again, pressure off a little bit because it was in a safe space. And then out of nowhere, I ended up meeting my now husband, who is American, and he knocked me over the head and dragged me off to the States. At which point I kind of quit theatre again. So I didn't really have any main intention of going into that when I moved over to the States. But as life has it, he ended up hearing a voiceover reel that I'd done back in Australia that I'd never really used, but I'd recorded it, and we'd been mucking around with doing invitations and character voices and stuff. And he came home one day and he said, off you go. You need to go and do this.
Oh.
I was like, no, what if I fail again? This is going to be terrible and I'm going to be a mess and it's going to be all your fault. And he said, I'll take that risk. You go and make that happen. And so kind of pulled my bootstraps up and opened the wonderful world of the internet and dove in.
Wow. So I'm going back a bit, only for my curiosity more than anything. When you were at Nova, what year was that?
That was in 2004 to 2005 to 2007.
Okay, it wasn't that long ago then. I think I know who you were working with. Yeah, because I actually did a year of promotions in Perth as well. Back in long before then, but it was back in 1994. Oh. It used to be 96 and they changed it to Triple M. It was a disaster. So that was kind of almost the end of my radio career. I had another maybe 3 years after that in Sydney and then gave it away. But you probably would have been working with Gary Roberts, was the big chief?
Gary Roberts,
yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I know Gary.
Yes. Yeah, it was really great environment, actually. It was I think if I want to be dramatic, I could say it kind of really saved me in a way because it pulled me out of my funk, and it was just I think because live anything gives you a buzz that is incomparable.
The other weird thing that we have that's a coincidence as well is that I met my wife in Perth.
Really? I did not know that either. Is she a Perth girl?
No, she's from Melbourne, but she was there working for Westfield. In fact, she was over there to set up Westfield Carousel. I think it was the first Westfield in Perth, from memory.
Yeah, I think it was definitely the first, big shopping mall.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And we lived a bit of away from Carousel, but it was like that thought of, we all got to go because it's going to be like America in the movies and everything.
That's right. But it wasn't. Or maybe it was.
No, it was pretty good. Look.
Yeah. Shopping mall's a shopping mall.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, now we say that, I think.
Yeah.
I think I do kind of also forget that growing up in Perth and in the time we grew up, you still kind of had that get on your bikes and go and no, only 3 television stations and just all those kind of little things. No big shopping mall. All the movies came 6 months later and now with the expediency of everything and you can see a movie yesterday kind of thing before it even opens.
Yeah.
It seems bizarre, but...
Yeah. It's interesting because I went to Perth. First time I went was in 85 for the West Australian Music Awards, and then I went back in 86 to host it again.
That's right, because you used to host...
a TV show there, called Tracks the Music.
Tracks the Music. It's what all the kids listen to.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, that was another lifetime ago, or maybe 2 lifetimes ago. I'm not quite sure, really. I'm trying to work that one out. So, anyway, now we've got you into America. I'm assuming you landed initially in Los Angeles?
No, actually, I was in Washington, D.C. because Ed, my husband, was based there at the time. He didn't have family or anything, just the job that he was doing happened to be there, which, to be honest, D.C. was an incredible entree into the US because it's so international. There's a lot of movement, obviously, with different administrations, and so there's lots of different people moving back and forth. So they're very open and welcoming to newcomers to the city. And obviously, being the political heart of America, you couldn't really get more American than that. And so I watched all my episodes of West Wing and really learnt my way around the city. But no, it was great. And it didn't feel kind of the claustrophobic inner city of like a New York, which, as fabulous and wonderful as it is, I wonder if I had have landed there, it might have been a bit overwhelming. But DC was a really great middle ground. And then, after a few years there, we decided to, kind of follow my career a little bit and see what we could make happen, and moved to the big city.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you get your first break?
A lot of hard work.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's amazing. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Strange that.
It's so true. Although one may say, Andrew Peters, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but my first break into animation, I think, actually happened because of you, because you knew a manager in New York who was looking for a female Australian based in
I do remember
the
that.
US.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Wow.
And then so I auditioned for Nickelodeon's Bubble Guppies and got the role and got a few episodes on that. And that, I think that, especially in the animation world, which is notoriously difficult to break into, that kind of helped open the doors for sure. But to go back to kind of the heart of it, I felt like it was a lot of small breakthroughs that kind of slowly opened as I kind of walked through them, so that by the time I got to LA, I had enough of my own personal clients. I pretty much started my career online, for want of a better word, doing a lot of the pay-to-plays, which at the time, the majority of them were a lot more reputable than they are now.
Yes.
Without going into that conversation.
Yes.
And then just kind of promoting myself through, cold email marketing and things like that, and got a lot of really good base clients. And so that gave me the confidence that, look, I don't need an agent. I don't need all the bells and whistles that people say you have to be an actor, because I was like, look, I'm making a decent living out of just kind of putting myself out there and doing my own thing after getting a demo made, etc. And but then by the time I came to Los Angeles, I think I just recognized that there was a gap in the market for Australian females, and there were definitely some talented people over here, but by no means anywhere close to the glut of Americans, etc. So I made an effort to, whilst working on my American accent, whilst honing my commercial skills and everything in that area, I kind of pretty much turned up at agent meetings saying, look, I know you don't have an Australian on your roster. I can fill that gap for you, and these are the clients I come with, and these are the jobs I've gotten. So, yeah, I mean, my big break could have been the first agent I got, the first animation gig I got, the first video game gig I got. I think it just all kind of has built on itself to then get me to where I am now.
No, there's a really interesting thing about performers. They see someone and go, I want to be like that person. And you end up copying someone and you forget the most important thing. There's only one of you.
Yeah, well, and that's a really great point, because I would say to that, I remember being in Australia and seeing my friends around me kind of succeed and things happening for them. And one very good friend indeed, who is now very prominent as a director, we always used to sit around at night being like, how does he just go? He's like an amazing networker. He just talks to people and he's got this knack and blah, 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 blah. And then you'd say to him, what do you do? What's the secret? What's the trick? And he's like, I'm just being myself. I'm just talking to people. And we're all sitting there going, no, he's got some secret. He's just not telling us, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't till I came to LA, and I think because I'd gone through what I'd gone through in Australia, I just was in a little bit of a, you know what, insert expletive here. It's like, I got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
People hate me, they hate me. If they love me, they love me. Great. I've got my own clients. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go out and be myself. And obviously being myself and being Australian was different to a lot of people. So rather than pretending to be an American when I walked into the room, I would just be Australian, and that's who I am. And subsequently, over the next few years, had a lot of people going, oh, but you're so great at networking. What do you do? And how do you do it? And just those same kind of thoughts echoed in my head of like, it really is just be yourself and be okay with who you are. Because I think the biggest thing is usually, no one's going to like me, so I couldn't possibly just be me, because what do I have to offer? But when you go, well, who cares if you don't like me? I am who I am, and that's it. And then kind of people tend to gravitate to that. So, yeah, just kind of interesting that the last thing I thought of, making myself be different and be embracing what was different about me rather than trying to blend into the crowd and pretend to be another American. Yeah, the thing that was different about me was what helped me stand out, which then people trust you because they're like, you're a good actor, you do a good job. Can you do an American accent? And it's like, well, yes, I can. And then you start getting those jobs. So that's kind of how all that happened.
It's funny because we spoke with Helen Lloyd, who's a UK actress and known for her voice work now. And the question was for her, being someone who actually grew up in England, I know how English people react to self-promotion. They hate it. And kind of Australians are sort of in the same boat, really. Americans have no problem with it whatsoever.
No, well, and I think that's Australians kind of grow up with that tall poppy syndrome. It's like, don't stand up too tall, blah, blah, blah. But then you do come over here and look, there is a ton of talented people, but there's also a glut of people who think they're talented and will talk themselves up. But they're not, or they're happy to talk themselves up, but they're not willing to put the work in. And when I started realising that, I was like, why am I stepping back from the crowd? I'm actually better than this person, but people know that person more because they're willing to talk about themselves, even though they have nowhere near as many credits or as much experience as I do. And again, that was one of those moments of like, I'm done with that. I'm not doing that anymore. If I'm good for something, if I'm right for something, I'm going to say it. And if I've done a good job on something, I'm going to say it. And I've done a crap job on something, I'm going to say that too. So. Yeah.
There's a funny thing though, it's the 80-20 theory, which is, the 80% bullshit and the 20% talent. And it seems to work, strangely. You can bullshit your way into a really nice career if you're willing to go for it. And
well, that's right. And I think Australians generally tend to be more successful over here than one might think, but mainly just because so many people have such an arsenal of work or of training or of ability behind them before they come over, whereas, it's not just that I've got the stars in my eyes and I'm just going to pack my bags and go and see what happens. I think Australians kind of tend to really, dig their heels in and go, look, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. So, and
it's also harder here. People think it's harder to go somewhere else, like to the UK or to the US. But the fact is, there's so few of us because the population's small. That to succeed in Australia is much harder than to succeed in a country that's got a population of 300 million.
Which seems incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense of you kind of go, you grow up. I know a lot of people grow up having I'm going to go to Hollywood and be a big star, but I never had that because in my head I was like, who does that? No one really gets to do that. That just is, that only happens in the movies or it's one or two people or whatever. But I really do think it's like any dream you have, if you really commit to it and try and try and try, and even if it keeps kicking you down, if you really know and feel deep down this is the thing for you and it's not just about money and it's not just about fame and, I don't know, conventions and credits and whatever, but it's really what drives you to do it, I think you eventually get there. And somewhere like Australia, as you say, it's just, unfortunately, there's more talented people than there are opportunities available. So what better place than to get out?
Yeah. The one thing that's different about our business, changing the subject slightly, as opposed to being an actor, you rock up and you learn your lines and you either in front of a camera or you're on stage. But now, of course, with being a voice actor, you have to have the full toolkit. So now, all of a sudden, we're not rocking up to a studio and having someone set the mic up, give us a glass of water, here's the script, and direct us through the thing. We're, like we are right now, sitting in our own studios doing stuff. So my question to you is, how did you first build your studio at home? I mean, where did you get your advice from? And did you get advice and learn by mistakes?
Yeah. Many mistakes.
Yeah.
No. I think that goes with the territory of what I said, that I was fortunate in a way because I started in the online world. I kind of immersed myself into every voiceover forum, into every kind of publication and Facebook group and LinkedIn group and everything I could get. And so I slowly, after a while, kind of started to pass out what was BS and what was legitimate, or what names did I keep hearing over and over. And I was lucky enough to come across people like George Whittam pretty quickly. Dan Leonard, one of his
compadres,
thank you. Yeah, and so I think actually my first quote, a very open quote, home studio was actually the house that I lived in had tile floors, and so I walked him around on Skype through my house, and we set up a room divider covered in blanket on the floor with the open, not walk-in closet, but open closet, but that it kind of formed a little corner around it. And that kind of did for a while, because I mainly did at that stage kind of telephony work or corporate video work, but a lot of stuff that lived online. So what I've now come to learn that the compression when anything goes online is so much that you can kind of get away with it not being as pristine. But even at one point we had a blow-up mattress kind of resting as a ceiling to kind of stop, but it started from there. And then the more money I made, I could invest in a better room divider and better sound blankets. And then I bought like my first booth. And so just kind of, it was a process of elimination. It was a process of the more money I made, the better the booth became, the better the microphone became, the better the studio setup became. And and then I discovered the joys of Mr. George Whittam, who created editing stacks for me, because I'm by no means an engineer in any sense of the word. Like I can put my levels up and down and that's about it. But he offers a service whereby you can send him your audio and he will create like a one-button click stack for you that will clean it all up and make it sound the best that it can with the facilities that you have.
Yep.
And so then that became a game changer, because I didn't have to fully learn the world of engineering, but I knew that whatever my output was, it was improved by what George had created, and subsequently became like the best of all professional studios that you could get, but from your own home.
Perfect. Yeah, George. George is a clever man. He actually analysed some of my stuff from here as well.
Indeed.
So
I'm
you
sure
went,
other people can do it, but
yeah. Oh, George is great.
well, correct.
And we're using Source Connect now. I mean, that's the other part of the show.
Well, now I actually have 2 studios, which I'm excited about. So I have my home studio, which is a audio booth and set up with a Neumann TLM 103 and Apogee 1, Adobe Audition. And then I have another studio which is on the other side of the city, because if anyone who knows Los Angeles, you can be stuck in traffic forever.
Yep.
And so if you happen to be up one end of the city, you kind of want to stay there rather than go back and forth if you've got a few things to do. So with a girlfriend of mine who's also a voice actor, Yenny Alvarez, we went in together and we rented a studio in Burbank, and I actually had another audio booth, which is another story. But anyway, we set that up, and we have a Sennheiser 416, and we have like a legit engineering rig in our studio that I don't even pretend to really understand, but we've got ISDN and Source Connect Standard, IPDTL, anything you want.
Yeah.
We got it.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I've often thought about that myself, but then I don't really, there's so many people I know in Melbourne that I don't really need it. I'll just say, can I drop into your joint? So that kind of works.
Yeah, well, and to be honest, I could have done the same, but I find my personality tends to be, if I drop into friends' houses, I don't really want to do work. I just want to sit around and drink wine and coffee and
yes,
waste a ton of time. So
funny you should say that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to each their own, but it's been really great for us to have the other space as well. And as you were saying, it was just a element of over time, kind of you just immerse yourself into the world that you love. And I was making money and I'm in a position to have that situation, so why not take advantage of it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I would say so, yeah.
But there's, I mean, I talked to Robbo and he's younger than me, of course, but we still remember the days of tape and cartridge players and, splicing tape and all that kind of thing. And now we're sort of in the box. But you kind of look at it and go, God, with all this AI stuff going on, I mean, what the hell is going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. Because you do hear about the scariest of them all, which is the audio programs that can just take a voice print and then create what it can create. And, you know, then I know virtual reality sessions where motion capture and everything, and that once they've kind of captured your body and your face print, they can morph that into thousands of different things. I mean, they're not really meant to, but you can't control or police that sort of thing. So it is what it is. I don't know. I like to believe in humanity remaining a face-to-face kind of business, and that while for sure there is that element of the ease of technology, I think removing humans from the equation, I think that's going to be longer than people think. I think the ease of having a digital program to do that doesn't outweigh the kind of the experiential joy that you get with actually working with another person. So I don't know, that might be me being naive or a little bit, you know, starry-eyed about it. But that's my hope, at least in the world we work in.
Yeah. I think, look, there is a consistent answer. Everyone I've asked has pretty well said the same thing, that they kind of see AI as being for on hold or instructional videos, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the nuances of, you know, like a proper read, selling something, or being intimate, or a narration, or an audio books, AI is not going to cut it. I say can't. It may. Not at the moment. The technology wouldn't work. And there are nuances about the human voice that I don't know how you would capture that, because it changes continually.
Right. Yeah, well, and I even think the interactional element of kind of working with that person is even, like, one could instruct an AI to create X product, but I don't know how far off we are actually that artificial intelligence coming up with its own thoughts and emotions. Maybe thoughts, but emotional responses, I think, is a long way off. And that's a good thing, because I think human beings haven't been able to work out how to control their own emotions. So I don't know how they're teaching that.
Well, that's true.
To artificial intelligence. So
absolutely,
we'll see.
I think you're dead right there. And on that bombshell, we should get back to the other chaps and carry on with the show. But Larissa, thank you very much for your time, and see you in LA for a glass of wine.
Thank you. Can't wait. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Oh, a nice glass of red. Well, there you go. That was Larissa Gallagher, the woman who can claim to have Hugh Jackman making coffee for her. Yeah, and I think you've got a Jackman story, Robbo. What's your Jackman story?
My Jackman story is I actually played rugby against Hugh Jackman when I was at school. I didn't know it at the time, but I put two and two together that we actually went through year 12 in the same year, and he went to school at the rival school down the road from us, and I also found out that he played first 15 the same as me. So when you do the maths, that pretty much means that I've tackled and rucked Hugh Jackman.
The Wolverine.
The Wolverine. There you go. I've put him on the ground. I've put him on his ass at some stage.
Good work. Now, George, you were saying also that you obviously you know Larissa, but you helped her out with an early studio before Dan got involved.
Yeah, before she made it to California, she was in Washington, D.C. area, I believe.
Yep.
And she had called me, and that was a number of years ago, at least 5 or 6 probably, to, assess her home studio and kind of troubleshoot. And I believe memory serves that the main issue we were discussing was acoustics.
Uh-huh.
And that seems to be the issue the majority of the time with home studios, personal studios, project studios, is acoustics. Getting the acoustics right is the biggest challenge of all. So that's what a lot of people will consult me with and help them deal with, getting the acoustics and all that sorted, and the mic placement, which works directly with the room acoustics and the size of the room, which could be a nice segue.
Yeah. Into
it just starts.
Sean Caldwell, who works in an open room, who discussed that on the VO Atlanta special. I was curious about that, how that would work.
Yeah, I'll put my 2 cents in since I was warmed up. But a larger room, I think, is really, really nice to have when you can afford the space. With a larger space, you have a natural resonant frequency of that room that's much, much lower. So the fundamental mode or the frequency that the room wants to ring, kind of like ringing a bell. A big bell rings lower. If you have a larger room, that frequency is going to be below your vocal range in many cases. And so you eliminate that frequency, that end, low end stuff from getting into the recording. And as the room gets smaller, that frequency goes higher and higher until you end up with like a 3x3, booth where that resonant frequency is right smack in the middle of the vocal range. And you really have to deal with that with a lot of bass trapping and other things. So I like the big rooms when they're possible, but they certainly have a lot of their own challenges.
Yeah. Robert, you're in a big room today, right?
I am in like my little music room here. So actually in this room, there's very little absorption, but so I'm not sure how it's sounding to everybody.
You can
but
hear it. It's ringing.
Yeah.
It's ringing, but it's
ringing like a
ringing in
bell.
a pleasant way. It's not resonating.
It's not.
Well, yeah, it's like this is a no parallel.
Yes.
There's no parallel surfaces in here. In fact, the ceiling's vaulted at an angle, which pissed off the carpenter.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah, but there's literally no parallel surfaces in here, and that sort of helps things not, infinitely ring around, and it gives it life without, But one thing I can say just from other types of projects in ADR, a lot of the times you're trying to do ADR and you have a talent who you're trying to replace something that was shot outside. And that is one of the hardest things. If you got someone in a small room and then you want to make them sound like they're outside, have fun. You really have to have that room dealt with well. But if you have a bigger room and you get a lot of absorption in there so it's not, reflecting, then the room goes away much quicker and you can put that person in any type of environment much easier. I don't know if that makes sense, because the bigger the room, the walls literally are farther away, and so there's just less distance, and the signal to noise ratio, which is probably the biggest thing in these things, is closer you are to that mic, the gain is lower, the mic hears the room less and hears you more.
Yeah, that's where the mic placement comes in. Yeah, the in big rooms you can afford to work the mic a bit further away, but I find that in really small studio spaces, because of the early reflections, that initial bounce off the wall above, the ceiling above, whatever, even if it's got 2 or 3 or 4 inches of foam on it, sound still does pass through it. The foam basically filters out everything above 200 and 300 hertz, but everything below that, guess what? Bounces right off the wall and comes right back into the mic, creating that hollow, I'm in a box sound. So those bigger spaces don't have that hollow box sound, and I love them. They sound great.
So when you say a bigger space, where would you start? What would be the entry-level bigger space?
That's a good question. What is the line between a small room and a big room?
I think beginning at 7 feet and like at least a 7x5, I would consider that like a medium room, and a big room, like a Foley room, I think you're talking more in the area of like a 15-foot kind of wall and maybe 10 feet, but like some big rooms. Acoustics are hard to get rid of, like you can kill the walls as much as you can, but the bass is the hardest thing to get rid of. And that's where that boxiness definitely comes from.
The room I'm in now is about 6 foot wide and about 8 foot long.
Yeah, that's getting out of small room territory to me. That's like a nice medium size that you can really get, good control over a room that size. And then how high is the ceiling then?
The ceiling is cathedral. So at one end, it's only 6 foot and a bit. The other end, it would be about 7 foot something.
Okay. Yeah. So it's overall on the low side, but the fact that it's sloped is helping things a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of things with rooms. There's these golden ratios of, walls, like length to width and things like that, because, it's not just the air volume, but the ratio of the walls. Because if you had a 30-foot wall on one side and a 2-foot wall on the other side, you're still going to get a lot of bounce between that 2-foot dimension. Yep. So, that's an extreme case. But there are, you look at the acoustics papers and whatnot, and there's this curve that shows like kind of these golden ratios. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, George. Have you seen those?
Yeah, golden ratio. It's kind of like the ratio, the length to the width, the length and width of the room to the ceiling. And
exactly.
The worst possible scenario is a cube.
Yeah.
You do not want to record in a cube. Next up, you don't want to record so much in a square either, if you can avoid it. So you really want to record in a rectangle, with where no two dimensions are the same, nor are they too terribly close, and nor are they too terribly different either, because then you have a corridor,
Right.
a hallway.
Hallway.
So then you start getting bigger. You just keep moving those walls out. Now, the whole non-parallel wall thing, leave that to the pros. I mean that's complicated.
And I think that also gets more into like a music thing where you're wanting the room to have life, and actually you want reflections, but you don't want reflections with frequency. You want reflections with kind of randomness. And I don't know how much the non-parallel wall thing helps with the low frequency. It probably helps a little bit, but definitely if you've ever walked, what's the classic place where you can clap your hands and hear the boing? That's really the reason to not have parallel walls, is because it can't bounce back and forth infinitely.
Well, that room we were recording in last week, I forgot to do it when we were doing the podcast, but I did it when I was doing another podcast with Dan for VOBS.
I saw you.
And it did the perfect ping pong of you get the like that when you clap your hands. I mean, it was really bad.
Yeah.
Like you guys could have put anything on either of these two walls and that would have helped, something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's funny is like, you clap your hands to hear it made obvious, but that is still happening it's combing out the sound of your voice. It still is at lower volumes reflecting back and interacting with what the mic is hearing. So, but that's still happening. Mic placement, you can try to find a place in the room where those sort of slapping slap echoes are minimized. If you really have a room like that, you get into the porta booths and those things, trying to shield the mic from hearing all that stuff.
Yeah. Interesting story to leave us with. A friend of mine recorded Annie Lennox many years ago in a church hall in France. And he's told the story that she spent about 2 hours walking around the room, clicking her fingers, just walking around. And then she said, put the mic here.
This is the spot. Yeah.
Sure. David Bowie is recording Heroes, and you know how as he sings louder, it gets more roomy?
Yeah.
And what they had done is they'd set up a series of microphones farther and farther away from him and gated them. So as he sung louder, the volume of his voice opened up those more distant mics. And therefore let in more of the room. And that was part of that Heroes vocal effect.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? What
yeah, and that was something he actually continued doing, I think, for most of his career, because I did see an interview where someone was talking about exactly that. It was fascinating, the David Bowie vocal mic setup.
Awesome.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I thought that was only a Heroes thing, but yeah, cool.
Yeah, you could be right, but I did remember seeing that. I thought he used it more, but I could be wrong.
That'd be a great demonstration for people learning about mic placement and what rooms sound like, to be able to take the ISO tracks from something like that and let them hear what those placements sound. That would be really neat. I should recreate that sometime.
Yeah, be very cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, we can all go and do a bit of homework about the golden. Was it the golden
ratio?
The golden ratio.
The golden ratio. Yeah.
I think that's what they refer to it as.
I'm going to listen to some David Bowie. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, good move. I love that album, Heroes.
See you next week? Next fortnight?
Sure.
Everybody coming back or not? We all had enough.
Are you talking about the listeners or us?
Yeah.
Both.
Good point.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Wipe the tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know. I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh. There's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin chin, na poo toodaloo, goodbye.